there are many ways to make a more likable character, and one of the best ways to do this is to start by thinking about the human side of your character. One of the best ways to create a naturally likable character is to make them a character that feels realistic and believable. So you need to ensure that you give them traits, qualities, likes and dislikes that make them into someone that feels believable on the page. As your character goes through their journey, think about if you were in their shoes, what kind of actions you would take and how you would feel about certain situations to really humanize them as a character. A character feels less likable when they feel too mechanical, when the character feels like they were really forced and their personality and traits are really written down and pre-prepared on the page. So you really need to ensure that in order to make your character likable, they need to be someone who feels realistic, someone who feels like they could be anyone that you may meet in real life, in your life. And that is how you can make them a lot more believable. You also need to make a character that your audience would genuinely like. Now, this doesn't mean that they need to be a good character, they could be a villainous character too. But they need to be someone that your readers will enjoy reading about. So basically, if you're creating a good character, they need to be someone who embodies a lot of the traits that your readers may really like. They need to be someone who takes action. They need to be someone who is willing to do certain things in the story. They need to be someone who has a lot of traits that maybe your audience can relate to as well. Or if you're creating a villain character, they need to be someone who's entertaining to read about. Maybe you give them a really good reason behind their villainous actions, which can also help to really help them be humanized as well. Make them into someone who feels like they have a reason for doing the things they do. Or you can even make them someone who's really strategic or cunning, which makes them very entertaining to read about. So in order to make a likable character, you need to ensure that they are interesting to read about. And even if they are not necessarily a morally good character, they still need to be someone who's really entertaining to read about, someone who your audience will want to see their journey through. Now, another key thing to creating a likable character is you need to also ensure that their design is good, and this is particularly important if you're creating a manga, a comic, or a graphic novel. You need to ensure that their design makes sense for the character and really stands out. So it really also depends on the story as well. If your character is dressed in a certain way to survive in the world they're in, maybe they're in a post-apocalyptic world, then your character will need to dress in a certain way to survive in that. But I guess what I really mean is their design needs to be eye-catching enough so that they feel memorable on the page. You need to ensure that their design also feels like something that your audience may want to draw or maybe want to feel inspired by in the stories they're creating too. So really think about how your character's design can not only make sense for the world they're in, but also be likable and memorable enough that your audience will really pay attention to that design. That design can incorporate the character's outfit, their hairstyle, and other elements or accessories. You also really want to consider the character's world and how the character fits into that world. So what part does this character play in the main story and the world that you're creating? So this is where a little bit of world building comes into play too. So maybe your world is set in normal times and everyone goes to school, but in this instance you need to think about what impact does your character make in that character's world. So in this instance, if the story is set in school, then you need to think about what part your character plays in that school. You need to think about what they do from their day-to-day, how they interact with the other characters around them, and how they make an impact on their world. But then if you think about if you have more of a fantasy world, maybe your character is an elf or a different character type within that world. You need to think about what impact your character makes on the rest of that world. Does this character fit in as a piece in that world? And maybe there are other human characters, or maybe there's other types of characters like orcs in that fantasy world. So you need to think about how your character responds to being a part of that world and what kind of impact they make as an elf in that fantasy world. So basically what I really mean by this is consider what kind of world you are creating in your book and think about what part your character plays as being a character within that world. Now, another thing you really want to consider to make them likable is their personality. So their personality and their design go hand in hand. You really need to think about what kind of personality this character has. So if this character is someone who's really mean-spirited or nasty, it's going to be really hard to make your audience like this character. But as I said, even if you're creating a villainous character, they can still be likable. So what you really need to think about is what kind of characters you enjoy. Maybe you can make a list of characters you like in other manga or anime and use that as inspiration. Think about what traits and personality those characters have and why you really like those characters. And maybe you can incorporate some of those elements into characters that you're creating. For example, maybe you're creating a mystery and suspense type of story, and your main villain, you want them to be really likable. So this main villain, who's probably going to be a secret until the end of the story if it's a mystery, maybe they are someone who has gone through a lot of difficult experiences, and maybe those experiences have really shaped them today. And maybe the personality they show on the surface is actually someone who's really nice or really polite, but they've just gone through some difficult experiences, and that was why they ended up deciding to cause the mystery in this story. Maybe they did some bad things because they were afraid of what would happen if they did not do that thing. Maybe they had a really good reason to do it. So you need to think about how your character's personality appears and how to make them really likable as a character. Some other likable characters include characters who really take action in the story, characters who are really quite confident or bold, characters who can really help to shape the story through their words or actions, and also characters who seem like a normal everyday person, but maybe they're someone who's learning as they go along, and even that can create a really likable character too. So I also recommend that you give this character a goal. It's really important that characters have goals in the story because goals can help to push them forward in the story and help them to make decisions. So it's really important that you come up with a goal that your character can have. And even if your character is not the most driven character, maybe there's someone who doesn't automatically strive for the goal, it's still important to give them a goal to really focus on. And I recommend that this goal also be a really important goal in the story, a goal that affects multiple characters in the story. So to give you an example of this, maybe your story is set in a fantasy world and your character has the goal to defeat the villain. This goal would likely affect multiple characters. There would likely be multiple characters who have been affected by this really bad villain, and it makes sense for your character to go after this goal. But in other cases, maybe there would be a more personal goal. Maybe your character might have the goal that they want to become a bard or something in this fantasy world. This goal may not have as big of an impact because this goal is more of a personal goal to your character. So this goal, while it might be a good personal goal for your character to have alongside the main goal, it's really important to create a major goal that not only affects your character but also other characters in the story too. And while you can give them more personal goals, if you give them a goal that only impacts them, it's going to be a lot harder to create a stronger impact in the story. This is why with most protagonists, you'll notice that the main goals that they have will usually affect other characters or even the whole world as a whole. So you need to think about how you can create a goal that not only impacts your character, but other characters too. But that also brings me to my next point, which is give your characters a personal goal, because having a personal goal alongside the main goal will make them more believable and likable as characters. So even if your character does want to defeat the main villain, maybe as a personal goal they do also want to be a bard, and that's okay. Or maybe your character's at school and her main goal is maybe to make 20 friends, but she has also a personal goal that maybe she wants to gain a little bit more confidence. And maybe you won't make these goals explicitly clear, but they should still be something that you keep in mind as the writer as your character goes on their journey, because these goals will really help you to think about what impact your character needs to make in the story, and also what impact certain decisions would make as they continue on their journey. Another really important thing to creating a likable character is to ensure that your character changes alongside the story. So as the story progresses, think about how your character grows alongside that story. Where are they at the beginning and who do they become by the end of your story? I recommend creating smaller points throughout the book where your character changes or develops in certain ways in order to go with the story. So as your character learns new things or discovers new things along the story, they should grow and level up into the character they need to be by the end of your book. And that is ultimately what makes a likable character. A likable character is not necessarily only in their personality and their traits, but it's also really in what kind of impact they make on the story and how they shape that world. So when in doubt, create characters who really feel personal and important to you. Think about how you can create a character that you will really like as the author, a character that you really like to write about and draw. And in finding that character that you really like, then you'll be able to present that character much more effectively on the page. So thank you so much for joining me in today's video, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know about what kind of likable characters you're creating, because I would really love to hear about them, and I'm sure others would love to hear about them too. Make sure to visit my website midnightscross.com for free resources, templates, and interactive guides that can help you to level up your story. Thank you again for joining me in today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!